Thanks for watching the Silver River Chairs channel. This video is for those of you who have some basic understanding of the six-way pattern. The hardest part of getting the old stuff out is drilling the old stuff out without damaging the frame and punch through the binder loops. This also is a preview of what angle the holes are drilled. This chair has been heavily glued. There's a finish on this cane and you can see where the glue has pooled up around the edges. So we're going to have to take a chisel to that and then do some touch up on the finish later. I'm starting with a very small drill bit and then I'm going to work my way up in size. You can see that the drill started out a little straighter and then it turned this way to follow the angle of the hole. So now I know that each of these holes is going to kind of go at this angle instead of straight down. Worst case scenario, you drill through the back of the frame and we can patch it with epoxy. It happens, it's unfortunate, but just know that you can't destroy your chair fully unless you burn it. And I can start breaking up some of the glue along the edges. I also wanted to point out that this binder is a lot smaller than regular chair seats. Usually the chair seats have 4mm binder. This appears to be the same size binder as cane. Gently scrape off the glue, and sometimes you can even push up the binder, revealing the hole. As you can see, it's not easy. It's very messy. So you really need these holes to be totally clean. Some of them are going to have 8 strands of cane in them. If the glue is really gross and gunky like this is, you may have an eyedropper at home and you can use some regular white vinegar. So I like to use a syringe and inject it into each of the holes. This should soften up some of the glue. Once that kind of settles and absorbs, I'm actually going to use dental picks and pick out some of the remaining cane inside the holes. So I'm not going to lie, depending on the chair, this can take all day between letting the vinegar absorb, picking, progressively using a larger and larger drill bit, and just getting all the stuff out. Once you get all of the stuff out, then clean up the finish as best you can, and then you're ready to weave. So most of the blind cane chair backs that have a curve will curve this way. So you start with the vertical strands and then weave in and out of those. As usual, we're going to weave with the 2 vertical rows and then a caning needle, doing step 2, step 4, step 2, step 4, alternating strands as I go up the chair. Because you're gluing in these strands, I like to use nails so if you use a wooden peg, it can absorb the glue and get stuck in. The holes are often smaller, so cribbage pegs work or shaved golf tees. If you have wooden cribbage pegs or golf tees, you can coat the peg with wax to try to prevent the glue from absorbing into the peg. The nails work a lot better though. Once they're glued in, use the nails and I'll come back and twist them. Sometimes you have to use a tool to twist them, but I like to use the nails and the cribbage pegs. This means these strands have been glued. This means they have not been glued. I find it's best to glue bit by bit. That way you're not bent over gluing for hours and hours and straining your neck. So this one is done, and I'm going to show you how to glue in the verticals. Soak the cane 5-ish minutes, just enough to make it pliable. I'm only using 1 strand. It's relatively long, but it doesn't really matter. Right sides up, kind of inspect the length of cane, cut off anything that doesn't look good, line up the ends. Dab them in a bit of glue and side by side. And instead of gluing, I'm just going to test the size. This is obviously too big. I can feel them hitting the bottom. They still feel a little too poofy. I'm just going to take the tiniest bit off the ends. Still not going to glue it. I'm going to use a cribbage peg. Now you have the ends of your cane strand. Dab it in glue, just a little. Since this is my straight edge, this is where I'll go ahead and glue. Right sides up, dab of glue, just a little bit of glue, also some dog hair. Make sure they don't cross. Ends together, right sides up, raw side on the bottom, and I'm only putting the glue on the back side. That's too far away. That one's good. Make sure they didn't cross. Test the length. This one's a little too bowed up, so we'll take some off the ends. And now turn the chair upright and make sure this line looks good. Looks pretty good, as good as it can be. So now I'm going to glue these guys in. Instead of dipping the strands into the glue, I'm going to apply the glue to the back of the strands with the scrap piece of cane. So just the back side of the scrap piece. I'm going to put the glue to the back side of the hole here and to the back side of these pieces. And not a lot. Make sure they didn't cross. And this time I'm going to use a nail so I can remember that that is glued. If you get any glue on the outside, wipe it up. Now I need to count up and find where to start here. I did that with one of the other chairs. I started gluing in and then I realized there were more holes on this side than this side. Even though it looked nice and straight up here, it started going this way on the bottom. So these chairs were super challenging. So even though I want to start up here, I'm actually going to start weaving at the bottom. These chairs may look pretty regular, but they're not. They have kind of skewed holes. So this one here, I put in the verticals. They looked skewed this way. So I took out the top bits and I shifted them over one hole, and then it looked really skewed this way. This was the best way to do this chair. It has one short row at the side, and it's important because if I didn't have this short row, then there would be a big gap right here. But on this chair, it looked better with the short row on this side from here to here. And overall, you can't really see that the rows are slightly shifty. This is kind of the magic of chair caning and all these tiny little adjustments that you have to make. So hopefully your chairs are more regular than these. You don't need a caning needle to do this. You can do it by hand, but it is helpful. So I'll thread the caning needle in. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-ish holes that will get a pair of strands opposite each other. If you get several strands of cane, you can make them a couple of inches longer than necessary. So all these guys I'm going to save for later. The great thing about this type of caning is that you don't need long strands. 16, 18. I'm going to throw 3 extra in just in case. So this is more than enough. I'll get all these ends together and tape them and thread them through all at once. Okay, with the chair propped up on a block so you can access underneath, push all of these through. And remove the needle. And I'm going to shift all of these out of the way, except for one. So here where this pesky short row is, they're not going to go any further. I'll count the holes. One already has a strand, so 1, 2, 12, 13. So I'll count out 13, 12, 13. I'm going to give it one more just in case. These strands move up here. So now we just have to weave in the other part of the pair, which will be opposite this strand. Where this strand went under, we are now going to go over. Now weave in the second part of the pair. You can either do this by hand or use a caning needle. If you don't have a caning needle and you need to weave by hand, it's just the opposite of the last strand that's in, going over and under. And because there's so much slack in the panel right now, you can literally weave all the way across. Pull down this guy, make sure it's shiny side up.
When it's time to glue, you want to be really careful bending the ends out of the hole because they can break and then you'll have to weave them again. You might want to soften them with a washcloth before you do that. Now you're going to apply the glue to the inside of the hole, mostly to the inner side of the hole where the cane is going to stick, and also to the back side of the cane. Wipe up any glue that gets on the frame with a damp cloth, and remember to use a nail instead of cribbage peg so you can remember that you've actually glued that part. Glue in the next several strands and remember to protect the cane where it bends backwards. You don't want it to bend backwards and crack, and then you have to weave those rows again. Feel free to come up with your own method of doing this. You can weave a row and then glue it in, weave the next row and glue it in, but I like to do them in groups.
As I move up the chair and have things glued, I'm going to occasionally spin the nails so they don't get glued in. Should you glue in a peg, you just have to carefully drill it out. Maybe drop her some water in there too. But with the nails, a little trickier. So occasionally spin. And the cane is getting pretty tight here, so I've been occasionally spritzing it and wetting it from the back. These 2 strands of cane are going to go into that hole. So if I glued the bottom one down first, I have to bend this one a lot to try to get that one in. So I'm going to glue this one first, then this one. If you grab a pair of needle nose pliers or tweezers, you can pull tension with the pliers to get the cane to go all the way in. So on this side, it's the opposite. The lower one is the one that's under the vertical and will be the hardest to get in. So we're going to do that one first and then the upper one. So as we get up to the ends of the verticals, it's really going to be tight to bend the horizontals in to glue them. So luckily, we didn't glue those. We can just pull them out and glue in. I'm now to the point where I can attach the strands at the top. I had them soaking for a little while.
Bear with me, I like to add the corner diagonals first.
Once you've decided on your proper pattern, just do it somewhere in the middle. Let's see. This one, it always takes me a minute to figure it out. This one is going to go over verticals and under horizontals. And this direction is going to do the opposite. So it is going to go over horizontals and under verticals. Have the nice glide. No snaking of the strands. So I'm going to add this last row.
If this is confusing, just leave out those corner rows and glue in your strands. I like to get them done early because it's a little tighter when the strands are already glued down. The verticals and horizontals can pop out while you're weaving the diagonal.
So I'm going to run a diagonal in this corner, which is the really hard corner to glue down. It's just super tight. So before all this glue sticks, I'm going to run some diagonals. And I'm just going to weave any way I can follow a path first. So this one will drop in here. I'm going to leave enough to get across to this side, plus a little extra. I'm going to weave one right next to it. And that one is going to join that diagonal in the same hole. So one goes over and one goes under. Get tight in there. So that's pretty hard to bend, but I haven't glued this in yet, so I have space. It is important to open up the hole because you still have to put 2 strands in for the binder. And that looks okay. I'm going to do the same thing here. This is why it's important to get as much material as possible out of the holes when you're drilling them. Now just weave these guys in. The diagonals help lock the grid in place. So as I'm weaving this way, I'm also kind of pinching the pairs a little closer together. So the long bit that goes under the diagonal gets glued in. Very crowded hole. Need to make sure it's going to have plenty of room for the binder to go in. And because it has so much cane in there, I'm using smaller nails. I'll weave this in, and then we can get started on other diagonals. So in this direction of diagonals, all of these ends are going to come across this last setting and get glued into the next hole. Across and in, across and in, across and in. Over here, I have 2 directions of diagonals in, so facing this way, facing this way. These long ones are going to go over here, but first they have to go beneath the short one, right? So the long one comes across the last setting and in, and the short one goes under the last setting, across the long one and in to make a proper X at the edge. Once I get these in, it's going to pull that together and keep this from shifting. Glue in all of the long pieces, the ones that go over the last setting and in, and leave the short ones, the ones that go under the last setting, sticking up for now. This diagonal is a long part of the X on this side. And if you follow it back to this side, it's a short. It comes out from under the last setting and we'll go here. As you come up the chair, once you hit a corner, the same diagonal can be long or short on this side, and it becomes long up here. So long on this end, short on this end, long on this side, short on this side. Now I only have this bit to do and this bit to do. And when I'm coming this way, all these are glued in. So when I weave, I can do what I did earlier to save a little bit of time. Weave, and I'll glue the back. It doesn't matter that I haven't tested the size. It just has to go in, hold it down, and pull. Leave enough to get across. Anything that gets kinked like this, you really want to cut that off. It's whew, cool. Now I'm going to weave these in and try to get all of this side done. I'll show you the corners. You can grab little scraps from things you've trimmed off. You don't really need to start with a brand new strand. Got the long and the short. Long goes under the short. Short over the long, and use the pliers for tension so you don't back the slack that way. This one's coming from underneath the setting, so it's the short. We need to put in a long. That horizontal looks like it's come loose, so just grab a bit of glue, carefully bring that up, apply glue on the back side, and drop it in. And we have one more. There's always two diagonals from the same direction meeting in the corner with a little short piece from second hole to second hole. Two diagonals meet in the corner. We need one tiny piece, one that goes from here to here. It doesn't go over both. It doesn't go under both. It means the short piece is going to go on top, over, under. This is under, over. Big deep bend right here to put this piece in if we strap this one down all the way, right? So I'll leave this open. Now, if I had this one in, I would be making a very deep bend here. This one in first, followed by this one. And there you go, A in the corner. I've already got the long part of the A in, the one that goes over the setting. The one that comes under the setting is going to be the short part of the A. Just a dab of glue there. And there's our A. A in each sharp corner. All of these guys are glued in. I'm not going to lie, my fingertips kind of hurt. So we'll start with the binder on the bottom of the chair back. I like to do an overlapping binder, so I'm going to overlap this way for no particular reason. It doesn't matter which way you do it. I need to determine how big the staples are going to be or the binder loops. So just grab a piece of cane and think about it being flush to the frame. And I've got it stuck in as far as it can go. I'll bring it out and I kind of have that crease from where it bent over. So I'm going to bring it across and kind of make it crease on the other side of the binder too. And that gives me a nice bend on both sides. So I know it's this long on one end. I'm just going to give it a snip on that side. And before I glue it, I'm going to test it. All right. Cool. And then you just do that approximately 80 more times until it looks like this. And last but not least, we'll trim off the little fluffy bits. Thanks for watching the Silver River Chairs channel. Find us online at www.silverriverchairs.com or on Instagram at Silver River Chairs.